The 2024 NFL offseason is well underway, with the draft combine, as well as free agency just around the corner. All the NFL teams will be looking through these avenues to improve and bolster their rosters to achieve their upcoming goals. Now, of course, some teams have many positional needs that have to be addressed, but in general, everybody's got to work on something. And in today's video, that's what we're going to discuss. Here is one big positional need that every team needs to fill during the offseason. Starting with the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals have a pretty weak team compared to most on paper. This was a really tough year for them in which they've decided to move forward with Kyler Murray as their franchise QB, and with that in mind, it is in their best interest to draft him a true, bona fide number one wide receiver. Since the loss of DeAndre Hopkins, he just hasn't had such a thing. Ideally, with where they are right now in the draft at number 4, they could be getting Marvin Harrison Jr. That would be a perfect scenario for them and would set them up for a way more explosive offense than what we saw during the 2023 season. Now, of course, they could also go out and venture into free agency as well, but they could actually move the needle with their franchise for the future with a guy like Marvin Harrison, so hopefully they can go out and do that. Alternatively, you may also want to look at defensive back, as that Cardinals defensive unit is pretty lackluster, but generally, getting a number one wide receiver should be the number one priority. Atlanta Falcons, quarterback. No-brainer here. They struggled big time last season as they decided to go with Desmond Ridder, and it really did not work out. Clearly, he is not meant to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's a backup at best. Taylor Heineke ain't going to do it either. So the Falcons either need to trade up and draft someone in the first round that's top tier in terms of a prospect, or maybe look towards the end of the first round or the beginning of the second to get their guy in a Michael Penix Jr. or a J.J. McCarthy, or maybe even a Bo Nix if they see it necessary. Or if they're really feeling daring, they can go up to the Chicago Bears and ask what the price is for Justin Fields, or maybe go after Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins in free agency. Regardless, the Falcons need somebody new under center right now if they want to move forward. They were a good QB away from making the playoffs last year, so getting that piece really could be a good difference maker and a way for them to finally get back into the right direction as a franchise. Baltimore Ravens, cornerback or wide receiver. This is one of those teams where I couldn't pick between two really important needs for them. Well, I shouldn't say really important, but it could benefit them greatly. Starting with cornerback, the Ravens do have a solid defense overall, but it feels they're lacking a solid number 2 defensive back lining up next to Marlon Humphrey. That could plug up at the bare minimum one of the only real holes on that dominant Ravens defense, which could push them even more forward and move that needle even more up, even if it is just slightly. And at the same time, Marlon Humphrey has been dealing with some injuries lately, so just having another solid stud blue chip prospect would greatly benefit them just from a depth standpoint. On the other hand, for wide receiver, they drafted Zay Flowers. He's looking like a good franchise prospect for years to come, but they need another guy next to him. I'm not exactly convinced that OBJ or Bateman could be a solid number 2 or even a number 1. They need another guy to make that passing game of the Baltimore Ravens even more potent. If they can accomplish either of these things, that would be great for their franchise heading into 2024. Buffalo Bills, defensive depth. With Buffalo, I decided to go more of a general route, as when you think about their defense as a whole, as an entire unit, they were suffering big time from injuries, especially down the stretch towards the end of the year. They were lacking linebackers completely. They were scraping from the bottom of the barrel. They had no guys left. Drafting one might be pretty ideal for them. Not to mention that Tre'Davious White was also dealing with injuries. You don't know if he'll ever be the same after having a season-ending one, so maybe you want to draft a defensive back or pick one up in free agency. And what about edge rusher? Von Miller had a down year with his production. Things could change next year, but he's not getting any younger, so you might want to look towards getting his predecessor, maybe for the future, maybe right now. You can decide that, but just drafting and or looking through free agency to fill out those holes so it's less likely you get beat up and have nothing left down the stretch of a season would be ideal if they want to contend for a Super Bowl moving forward. Carolina Panthers, offensive depth. Literally the same approach with Buffalo, but other side of the ball. You basically can't do any wrong if you're Carolina here. You're already dead last. They by far had the worst offense in the NFL in 2023. They had one of the worst offensive lines. Maybe you want to approach that and help develop Bryce Young's confidence, keep him on his feet so he can improve his throwing and his decision-making as well. Maybe you want to get him another running back, somebody who's younger, who has less experience, but brings a lot of explosiveness to the table. Maybe you want to get him a true bona fide wide receiver number 2 and a predecessor for Adam Thielen, or even a tight end would be really good. Oftentimes, a veteran tight end can be a great security blanket for a young quarterback trying to find his groove and his confidence in the NFL. Literally, as long as the Panthers do something, that is a step in the right direction, and it immediately makes them better than what we saw last year. Chicago Bears, defensive back. There's a lot of places that you can go if you're Chicago. You might draft a wide receiver if you plan to get Caleb Williams, or draft an O-lineman that can protect him for years to come. I think both those moves make a lot of sense. But honestly, I think the Bears made some good strides towards the end of the season with their defense, but something they were lacking in is their pass defense. So if they can get a good safety or a corner through the draft or as an upcoming free agent, that could be a great way to bolster this Bears defense and have them take another step towards the next level to potentially become one of the next elite young defenses in the NFL. You've got Tremaine Edmonds up at linebacker. Your pass rush is getting better by the day. The one thing you're lacking right now is that pass defense. You can become a very complete looking defense if you're Chicago, and that can help a lot with your young offense that's trying to learn the ropes under what is going to most likely be a rookie quarterback. Having a good defense to keep them in games could be a great way to build confidence and have this new rebuild, so to speak, start on the right foot. Cincinnati Bengals, offensive line. We say this every single year, but it feels like nothing's changing, as once again, the Bengals lost their franchise quarterback Joe Burrow for most of this year. Injuries absolutely derailed what could have been a pretty successful year for the Bengals, where they were once again competing in the playoffs. But they lost him multiple times, in fact, due to injuries, because he just can't stay on his feet, be it in practice or in a real game scenario. It's just something the Bengals have continued to struggle with, and that's just unacceptable. You can't keep getting rid of these years of this guy's prime when he more than has what it takes to lead you to a Super Bowl. We've already seen it once before. Make sure it can happen again by protecting him. 50 sacks allowed is one of the most in the NFL. Fix it. Cleveland Browns wide receiver. The Browns are in a situation where things are developing nicely. I don't love their QB situation, but if you plan to build around this guy, then you're going to need some more weapons. Nick Chubb is hopefully going to make a full recovery, which will be great for them. That'll make their offense stronger, but I think they could benefit from having a true bona fide number 2 wide receiver. It felt like if Amari Cooper wasn't doing anything, then they didn't have a solid receiver out there, and they were relying a lot on Dave Njoku, who I must say has developed into a nice star tight end. But if they can get that other wide receiver lining up next to Cooper, they could have a solid 4-way threat going on with their running back, with their tight end, and 2 elite wide receivers. The Browns offense could take a major step forward, and they could be one of the best and most well-rounded teams in football. Dallas Cowboys, right tackle and/or run stopper. Starting with the O-line situation, generally they're pretty good here, but it just so happens that right tackle, at least statistically, was more of a weak point for them, as Terrence Steele, according to PFF, gave up 8 sacks, which is tied for 8th in the NFL. Not ideal if you're looking to compete for a Super Bowl for one guy to give up that many sacks, so maybe you want to replace him with somebody who has a bit more skill and a bit more experience. Then on the defense side of things with run stopping, Jonathan Hankins is apparently set to become a free agent, which means there is a hole at their interior lineman position, or you could go for another linebacker that's good with stopping the run. Either or would be good, as in my opinion, Dallas could be a bit better at stopping the run. Statistically, they were good there, but just when I watch them, it doesn't feel all that impressive to me. This could help make that defense even more deadly between the pass rush, the run stopping, and having a really solid secondary. Dallas have a couple moves they can make to make their team even better to hopefully get past that curse and finally make it to the NFC Championship. Denver Broncos quarterback. One of the easiest teams to talk about in this video. Denver and the whole Russell Wilson experiment was a complete and utter failure. It's going to go down as one of the worst trades in NFL history. After 2 years of having this guy, they're moving on. They're done with him. they want to try and save some money and find their new franchise quarterback for the first time since Peyton Manning. Sean Payton is looking to find his guy. He walked into having Russell Wilson at the beginning of last year. Now he can find a quarterback that he truly likes, either through the draft or maybe a veteran that has been on his eye for quite a long time. I'll repeat the same points as I did for the Atlanta Falcons. Maybe they're in the Justin Fields sweepstakes. They want to make a trade for him. Or perhaps they're looking to maybe trade up in the draft. The Patriots supposedly are somewhat open to trading away the number 3 pick, so maybe they could sneak in and either get Jaden Daniels or Drake May, depending on who Washington do not get. Or in a more realistic scenario, maybe they decide to stick where they are and draft a Michael Penix or a JJ McCarthy and just hope for the best. Detroit Lions. Cornerback. Let's cut straight to the chase here. The Lions had a very successful year, maybe even their most successful in franchise history thus far. They are a true contender in the NFL right now, but if they want to continue to be there and show more improvements, they need to upgrade their defense. Their offense was explosive, it kept them in a lot of games, but that defense was incredibly weak. Specifically, they were poor against the pass. Honestly, their run defense wasn't even that bad, but pass defense-wise, it was a nightmare. They need to find a true bona fide number 1 defensive back to shut down enemy wide receivers. Honestly, you're going to want to. Maybe free agency is also a key, but just start with one. Maybe drafting one is a good place to start because, oh my god, they gave up over 4,500 yards through the air, which is worse enough for 4th in the NFL, bottom 4 in the league in passing yards allowed as a title contender, a team that made it to the NFC Championship game. Giving up this many yards through the air, if you're trying to be a contender, is unacceptable, and it's something they have to fix if they want to take that final step to get to the Super Bowl. Green Bay Packers interior linemen. Their starting nose tackle on over 600 snaps in 17 games started had only 2 tackles for loss and 0 sacks on the year. He just wasn't productive enough. They need someone better. They need someone bigger, someone stronger, someone who is experienced with stopping the run. That was the Packers' Achilles heel in 2023 and allowed for some great teams to run all over them to keep them out of matches that were very winnable. If they can improve there, their defense is going to take a big step in the right direction, and if Jordan Love continues to improve, we could see the Packers become a big threat, not only in the NFC North, but in the NFC in general. Houston Texans defensive back. The Texans are in a very interesting situation this offseason, a way better one than most people could have ever anticipated thanks to the rise of CJ Stroud. That offense, outside of a few small things, is really good from top to bottom, so Houston truly need to focus up on defense if they want to improve and get to the next round of the playoffs. In particular, I'd like to see them upgrade that secondary a little bit, as Houston were bottom 9 in the NFL in yards given up through the air. Stingley seems like a good young option to have, but they're going to need another cornerback to line up next to him, or maybe you draft a safety or find one in free agency as well. Either or, it would be good. It would help this Texans team get stronger. You got to develop that young defense into something. It can't just be all on Stroud. We've seen what that's like already this year. As brilliant as he was, there are a lot of shootouts that were way closer than they needed to be, so upgrading that defense needs to be priority number 1 in order to take that next step towards greatness. Indianapolis Colts linebacker and or edge. The Colts really need to fill out the box a bit more this year, and I think they could go about it in a couple of different ways. One, it would be cool to see them get another outside linebacker to help fill out what Shaq Leonard once was for them. It's sad about his fall off and everything, but they need some other guy that can be that all-pro level linebacker to make it so that defense has a bit more depth. I'd also like to see them get a star edge rusher, if at all possible, because while the Colts actually were pretty decent when it came to pass rushing, they didn't have a single guy reach double-digit sacks, and I think having a guy like that could make it even more dangerous for the rest of the guys to be productive, as you have to worry about that nightmare matchup with that one specific guy who requires doubles. The Colts can upgrade their defense big time this offseason. They have some big-time opportunities ahead of them. Their rebuild is going way ahead of schedule already, so time to make a big move. Jacksonville Jaguars defensive back, or if Josh Allen doesn't come back, Edge rusher. Let's start with that second point first. So Josh Allen is set to be a free agent, and all rumors are saying that it's not looking good for Jacksonville to sign him as of right now. That would be a huge blow for them, as he had an excellent year. He is their only real solid pass rusher. Trayvon Walker hasn't become that guy yet for them, so they really need Josh Allen back on this team, or to find some kind of good replacement if he does end up leaving. If you are able to bring him back though, you should set your sights on upgrading your secondary. The Jags, after all, were bottom 8 in the NFL in total passing yards allowed this season. It's been a disaster ever since that OG era, the Saxonville era with Bouye and Jalen Ramsey. They have yet to find their Ramsey replacement since then, and this year needs to be the time. I mean, especially this offseason. With the emergence of Anthony Richardson, as well as CJ Stroud, the AFC South is going to be a terrifying battle, and they've got to make the upgrades necessary to keep pace, and defensive back needs to be one of their number one priorities to make sure that these young quarterbacks struggle. Kansas City Chiefs, wide receiver. Yeah, everyone saw this one coming from a mile away. The Chiefs desperately need more weapons. I mean, they were able to win the Super Bowl yet again without a really solid number one wide receiver, but it would be good to have one. Their salary situation may not make it possible for them to get that superstar, all-pro level receiver, but if they can just get guys that fit their system, that can at least be like a 1A, 1B with Rashee Rice, that would be great. Get a good slot receiver, get a good 1A or 1B, and you're in the driver's seat to defend and get that third Super Bowl in a row. The defense is only getting better by the day. You still have got the O-line, you still have Mahomes, you still have Andy Reid. Just make that one aspect of your team a little bit better, and the Chiefs are going to be very hard to stop, yet again, barring any significant injuries. So go out there and get yourself a number one receiver. Vegas Raiders, quarterback. Another quarterback-hungry team that is looking to fill out this ever so important position. The Jimmy G experiment was a failure. Aiden O'Connell clearly isn't starting material either, so the Raiders need to make some kind of move. Like I said for Atlanta, like I said for the Denver Broncos as well, there's a couple of different avenues the Raiders could look towards here. Maybe they even want to reach at their draft pick in the first round and pick up a guy that might even just go in the second, just so they can secure that young quarterback of the future, or maybe they want to pull the trigger and trade for Justin Fields. I could see him being a pretty decent fit there. With a decent O-line, with Devontae Adams, that could be a good home for Fields. I think the Raiders have options, which is good, but there's going to be other teams competing with them, so they've got to pull the trigger and take a risk for sure. Otherwise, they're once again going to be left in the dust in the AFC West. LA Chargers, cornerback. Oh my goodness gracious, this team needs help on defense desperately. They continue to be absolute trash despite having some pretty decent names on that side of the ball. I'm hoping that with Jim Harbaugh over there that they can finally figure it out, maybe draft a guy, maybe convince a guy to come through free agency. They've got to do something, as they're absolutely atrocious. They have been getting torched literally since week 1, for years honestly at this point. They gave up the second most yards through the air in the NFL at 4,580. They've got to get a better secondary, and it's got to happen now. Otherwise, Justin Herbert is going to be stuck in hell, constantly having these high-scoring affairs just to come up short because this defense can't get one freaking stop. Please, for the love of God, Chargers, give Justin Herbert some help on defense. LA Rams, edge and/or corner. I think both of these things would be a nice little upgrade for the Rams. Obviously, with the situation they're in with cap and everything, they're going to be limited in what they can pull off, but I'd like to see them address one of these two things to make what was a pretty mediocre defense a bit better. With edge, I mean, Aaron Donald can only do so much on his own. Dude gets doubled every single play. Having another threat on the edge that you have to worry about is going to make it so you still have some productivity on the D-line if Aaron Donald isn't doing anything, or maybe you could have them think about that guy and have Aaron Donald maybe get through a couple times as well. That would be very nice to help edge out that defensive line and make it more well-rounded. Or you can go corner, as the Rams, again, another one of those teams that wasn't great against the pass, that got torched a lot. It'd be good to generate pressure, have another shutdown guy over there. The Rams need just a little bit of help to help kind of move that needle, so to speak. It seems like they found something on offense. I like where they're going with Stafford and with Puka and the run game now. Now they've got to figure out the other side of the ball so they can move yet another step forward and make it past the first round of the playoffs. Miami Dolphins, cornerback and or tight end. I think Dolphins, if they could get at least one of these two things, would be very ideal. I can't decide which one's number one. I think they're equally as important. When it comes to corner, it seems that Xavier Howard is likely to be off the team, according to reports, so they're going to need another cornerback too to line up next to Jalen Ramsey. Simple enough. You got to keep that dangerous pass defense alive. It seemed like it was really starting to click towards the end of the year before the Howard injury happened, so you got to keep on that momentum there. And with the tight end, I feel like it's the one thing that's lacking on the Miami offense. That's the one place they don't have a household name where they're not truly solid. They have a good O-line, they've got great receivers, solid run game, decent quarterback. Tight end is like the one thing that keeps them from being a truly well-rounded offense, both with the blocking and with just adding another layer of danger when it comes to the passing game. If they could get another tight end, their offense would take yet another leap towards being one of the most dangerous in the league. Minnesota Vikings, edge, especially if they lose Danielle Hunter, and or quarterback if they lose Kirk Cousins. The Vikings are in this weird situation this year, where I feel like their biggest needs are likely going to be who they're unable to re-sign, / who they end up losing in free agency as they venture off elsewhere. I just have a feeling they're gonna lose one of these guys somehow, some way. Most likely Danielle Hunter. I don't know, maybe that's just a gut feeling that won't come true. But regardless, if they lose somebody like Hunter, they're missing out on a guy that just had a career season. He had 16.5 sacks in 2023 and was one of the biggest reasons why their defense was as productive as it was. And even if you do bring him back, no one else was particularly great on the D-line in 2023. So just having a guy lining up next to him on the other side of him, so to speak, would be great to help further increase the productivity of a defense that showed some good strides compared to 22. And obviously, it seems like they want to bring back Kirk Cousins. I know that Justin Jefferson wants him back most likely. It just seems like the right fit. He likes being there. They like having him there. It's a no-brainer. But in the result that he does go elsewhere, obviously you're going to need a new franchise quarterback. So they're going to be like a lot of other teams stuck in QB purgatory right now. The Vikings could be in a very dangerous situation or in an okay one depending on how this offseason goes. Regardless, I think they're going to have a couple of holes to fill up no matter what, as free agency can be a tricky game. New England Patriots, quarterback. New England is in one of the worst situations in the league when it comes to desiring a franchise QB. Mac Jones has completely fallen off a cliff, and they've got to find a new guy that they believe can lead them in this new regime under Jerod Mayo, a guy that truly is his, that he wants to coach. And luckily for the Pats, they're in a great position to start off this rebuild on the right foot at the number 3 pick in the NFL draft, depending on who Washington get, be it Drake May or Jaden Daniels. If the Patriots like that guy, they can draft him. If they don't, maybe they can draft back, get some assets, maybe get Justin Fields if they're lucky. Maybe that's the guy that they're aiming for. There's a lot of choices for the Pats, but they've just got to do something. They've got to find that guy that they believe in to give this fan base some hope again, because right now, they're in the darkness. The dark times are back for the first time in many, many moons. New Orleans Saints, edge and or linebacker. The Saints are in one of the worst situations in the offseason. They failed to make the playoffs last year, and now they're so severely above the salary cap that they're going to have to let go of a lot of important pieces that'll likely make their team a lot worse, such as Demario Davis, which is why I think they're going to need some kind of linebacker replacement, most likely through the draft where they can actually afford to do it, as losing a guy like that is a huge blow, and they need to find somebody to help move them towards the future. But also, I'd like to see them address the edge rusher position, as the Saints D-line was not all that productive. Not a single guy reached double-digit sacks for them, and that's despite being what felt like a pretty respectable defense overall. If they can add that extra pressure, maybe draft a young stud over there, that could greatly increase their potential and make their defense even more potent heading into future years. New York Giants, offensive line. I mean, where do I even start with the Giants? As a fan of this team, I could go on and on about all the needs. QB, wide receiver, defensive line, but the number one priority, be it through a combination of the draft as well as free agency, has to be the O-line. It was literally the worst in the NFL. They gave up 80 sacks in 2023. We haven't seen a number that high since 1990. That is like a historic level of bad. The QB situation may be terrible, but literally nobody has any time to throw whatsoever, so they're not going to have any chance to develop and get better, or have any desirable QBs come here anytime soon. They need to maybe go through the draft in like the second, third round in my opinion, but then also look to get a couple of veterans, maybe slide Evan Neal over to left guard if you can. The Giants have to make some significant changes here. Their offense was one of the worst in the league, and this was a big reason why. Get that O-line better, and maybe you can actually be productive. New York Jets, offensive line. I think I'm seeing double, boys. Much like their New York counterparts, the Jets were absolutely horrible on the O-line, arguably the other worst team in the NFL when it comes to that aspect. I mean, their quarterback went down after 4 freaking plays. Their Hall of Fame quarterback, the guy they traded for to help lead them to the promised land, was gone after just 4 plays in the regular season. This was foreshadowed basically from the Hard Knocks episodes about how bad that O-line is, and it didn't get any better. Now is the time to make changes. Aaron Rodgers isn't getting any younger. He's coming off a significant injury. You have potential on offense if you can keep him on his feet and give him time to throw. With Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, this could be a dangerous two-way team that could dominate the NFL and compete for a Super Bowl. But without Aaron Rodgers having time to throw, that's never going to come into fruition. The Jets need to do something now in the waning years of his career before he decides to hang it up and go smoke or eat magic mushrooms in a forest somewhere. Philadelphia Eagles secondary. Not gonna lie, I did not foresee this big of a fall off with the Eagles' pass defense. It was never that great, even last year when they made it to the Super Bowl, don't get me wrong, but to see them be one of the worst in the league, that is a bit of a surprise, and obviously, if they want to be competing for Super Bowls like they just did a couple of years ago, this needs to be changed ASAP. Like I said with Detroit, you can't be bottom tier in the league in pass yards given up in a season if you want to compete for a Super Bowl. It's just not going to happen, especially not against an elite quarterback like Pat Mahomes. You will lose every time without fail. This has been an Achilles heel of the Eagles for many, many years. It has been plaguing them. That secondary has always been a weakness. Now is the time to fix it. You have over $30 million plus maybe more in cap space, and you can draft a cornerback. You could sign a big name safety maybe. You have options here. This is what the Eagles need to get back on the right track, to be back in contention to make it out of the NFC. If they can address that defense and Jalen Hurts can build up his confidence again, there's no reason why they couldn't be in the big dance. They just have to make the right choices here. Pittsburgh Steelers, quarterback and or edge. Ideally, if I'm the Steelers, I'm going for QB. I believe they still have at least some confidence in Kenny Pickett and they want to give him another chance, but based off of what I've seen, he really can't throw a football that well, and this happens to be a very deep draft class with options that you could get in free agency or trade as well. I think this is a golden opportunity for the Steelers to upgrade their quarterback position and have an offense that has looked the best it has in many years, so don't waste it, you know? Why stick with what you have? Why be conservative when there's many opportunities right in front of you? If not, if quarterback isn't on the table, I'd at the very least like to see the Steelers get another edge rusher, just so TJ Watt isn't the only guy doing work. It felt like when he wasn't dominating a game that Steelers defense had no answer whatsoever for getting to the quarterback, so I think getting another edge rusher would be very ideal for the Steelers moving forward. It could make their defense level up a little bit, and maybe they can regain that form we saw a couple of years ago. San Francisco 49ers. Right tackle. I'll just cut straight to the chase. The Niners have an excellent O-line, but statistically, at right tackle in particular, they weren't holding up, as supposedly Colton McKivitz, sorry if I mispronounced that, allowed 9 sacks. PFF says that he allowed 9 sacks, which is tied for 4th in the NFL. That is a very high mark for a team that was in the Super Bowl. Making an upgrade there could be key. It can help protect them against another showdown with the Chiefs, let's say. You definitely want to be able to protect your young franchise quarterback so that dangerous pass offense can keep doing its thing. If not, you definitely have to look at linebacker at the very least, something else to consider for sure. After seeing the Dre Greenlaw injury, he's definitely going to miss some time at least at the start of this upcoming year, so having a replacement is very key. You need to have that linebacking core still be productive, so go out there and make it happen. Seattle Seahawks defensive depth. I'm putting a general aspect on what I'd like to see Seattle do, as I believe they could make a couple of good moves to make this defense better, along with some re-signings. They were like middle of the pack both when it came to the passing and rushing game on defense, so getting a couple of guys up front and with the secondary would be good. You want to make sure that you have Bobby Wagner back. It seems like Leonard Williams coming back would be a good idea too. I'd like to see them maybe get a premier edge rusher, as nobody on their team reached double-digit sacks this year, or honestly, a good corner or safety, maybe a Jamal Adams replacement, seeing as he keeps dealing with injuries, would be pretty good too. This team didn't get a lot of interceptions in 2023. Getting some more shutdown defenders who can force those turnovers would be awesome. I especially would like to see them maybe go through the draft and get somebody next to Witherspoon, have that good 1-2 punch like with the Legion of Boom days, or kind of mirroring what the Chiefs have done in recent memory. That could be a great way to establish a good young defense for years to come. Seattle needs to just make some moves over there to get over the hump and go from average to definitely above average. Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. Let's just say that the secondary for Tampa Bay in recent years hasn't been what it once was, and a lot of it starts with corner. They just lack the household names there these days. They've got to find that next shutdown corner to make their defense go back in the right direction. They somehow made it to the divisional round while being bottom 3 in the NFL in passing yards given up throughout the entirety of a season. They were still able to make it that far and just be out of range of the NFC Championship with that horrible of a pass defense working against them. So many games where Baker Mayfield just couldn't do more, where his defense could not hold. Bringing him back and giving him some kind of alleviation with that type of pressure would be nice. I don't know if it's going to be through free agency or through the draft, but the Bucs have to do something. This is a weak point that cannot continue to be exposed if they want to take the next steps to make it back to the NFC Championship. Tennessee Titans offensive line. The Titans are in a weird limbo state where clearly they're about to rebuild. I don't know if it's definitely going to be behind Will Levis. We'll have to see. But whoever is going to be at QB, they need somebody to really be able to protect him. The Titans' offensive line was bottom 3 in the NFL, tied for bottom 3 at 64 sacks given up, as much as the New York Jets. There is no universe where a young quarterback like Will Levis would have the chance to develop facing that type of pressure on a game-to-game basis. This needs to be fixed, and they happen to be in a great position to maybe draft a premier offensive lineman in the draft this year. That is a great place to start. But maybe you could also look through free agency as well. This is the first true year of your rebuild. You've got to make it a convincing one. You've got to start on the right foot and build up your confidence as an offense. And that's not going to happen if you can't keep Will Levis off the ground. And finally, Washington Commanders quarterback. Obviously, with how things went with the Sam Howell experiment, the Commanders need to get a new franchise quarterback. They've been looking for a very long time. They've been lost ever since Kirk Cousins left them, to be honest with you. And now is the time. You have the number 2 pick in the draft. You can choose whether you want Jaden Daniels or Drake May, depending on who you really fall in love with. And that could be the start to a great new beginning under this new ownership. I mean, Washington have a lot of good offensive players that could greatly benefit a young quarterback like this and help speed up his development big time. Alongside that, they definitely need to upgrade their secondary, literally the worst in the NFL. They couldn't stop anything for crap, so upgrading that and the QB situation would be an ideal way to start off the rebuild. And that is, in my opinion, some of the biggest positional needs for all 32 teams heading into NFL free agency as well as the draft. Let me know what you think down in the comments below and what you think some of these teams need to address heading into this offseason. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more NFL content.